Lenny. All right. It's good to see some familiar faces and some new ones. Very exciting. It's great to see everyone today. Nice to meet you all. Did you have a good summer? Wonderful. Wonderful. I did too. Went really fast though. They all go fast, don't they? Yep. Anybody do anything really interesting? What'd you do, Lillian?
My mom worked at a summer camp over the summer, so I got to spend every day at a summer camp.
So were you a camper or were you helping? Little of both?
Yeah, a little bit of both.
That's nice. That's great. All right. Thank you all for being right on time. I always start the classes right on time. And we use the first couple minutes to answer questions. So if you have any, you can bring them. You probably don't have much now since we're just really getting started. Eleni, you moved your older brother into, oh, wow. So you're going to have an extra room and a little more space at the table than usual. That's great. All right, let's see here. Let me arrange things a little bit. All right, so if you do have any questions, now's the time. You also don't have to wait until we have our live classes to ask questions. Send them to me in the middle of the week, whenever they come up. So my name is Dr. Joseph, and I am your honors bio teacher this year. Very excited to get to meet a lot of you and to see a lot of you again. So we have about half and half this year. About half the students were former students of mine in other classes, and half of you are new. So that's always fun. Both are fun. Let me go ahead and share my screen with you. We will dig right into what we're going to be talking about today. And here we go. All right. So the very first thing I want to do, I want to look over all your names and make sure I'm pronouncing them correctly. Okay, so Eleni, I know I've had before. Is it Ileana? Is that correct?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. All right, Shmuel?
Shmuel.
Shmuel.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So we put the emphasis on the end. Shmuel.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. You guys have to help me. If I get them incorrect, you have to correct me. It'll just take me a little bit and then I'll learn them. Lillian, Yaya, Leah, Zoe, Rudra. Is that correct? Rudra. All right. Luke, is it Aliza?
Yes.
All right. Ava, Sricia. And do we have two Avas in our class this year? Or are you in there twice, Ava? Yeah, I don't think we have two Avas. I actually do have Lillian. Gotta wait, gotta be patient, right? Lillian typed Kahoot because we do put Kahoot in from time to time. What I generally use Kahoots for is the end of class. If we end a little bit early with the content that we're going to cover and there's time, then we'll do a Kahoot. So I'll see if I can fly through this today so that we can get a Kahoot. We do have a little bit of information that we have to cover before we start talking about biology. So first of all, can everybody see that where it says welcome to Honors Biology? All right, I always have PowerPoint, some slides to show you. If ever I forget to turn it on, please don't let class go on for very long. Remind me that we have that I haven't turned it on yet. And sometimes my microphone I sound like a chipmunk. So if that ever happens, please don't continue class with your teacher sounding like a chipmunk. Let me know and I can just reset it, and that seems to fix it. All right. Moving on to some business things. If you are new to Canvas, if you're either new to AIM Academy or you haven't used Canvas in the past, I put a video tutorial in the course information module right at the top of the assignments page. I also have one, hold on just a second here. I also put it in the lesson at the beginning. There is a little picture of like a little light bulb that says course resources. It's also in there. So, okay. All right. Thank you for your patience there. I had a little bit of a tech issue. A couple things I want to point out that you might not be aware of in Canvas is some of the pages have what's called immersive reader, and it reads to you. So I it only reads what's in the text on the page. It doesn't obviously read the book. So you have to do the reading of the book yourself. But whenever I can, I have pages that you can use Immersive Reader for. You just click on that. Now it only reads the text. It doesn't show pictures. So I recommend, if you're using Immersive Reader, you have two windows open. So one, it's reading to you, and the other you're reading right along. Now I want to talk a little bit, especially for those of you that have my classes before. The course structure is different in this course. We have due dates by week rather than every single day. So the due dates are always on Friday of that week. And there's a couple reasons that I've done that. First of all, we have two sections, and that makes it possible to have everybody have everything due on the same time instead of having two different sections with a bunch of different due dates. So the other reason is to help you to learn how to structure your time. You guys are all honors students. I'm assuming that most of you are either going on to college or some kind of trade school, and the ability to have a good schedule, to make and set a schedule for yourself, is one that's really important. So I'm hoping that this is a step in that direction. Now, that said, we're running an experiment here. This is a controlled experiment, only one variable. We're changing due dates, and that's all. So I'm going to reevaluate. I'll gather data over the next month or so, and then I will evaluate the data, and we'll see. If it's working for you, we'll leave it the way it is. If it's not, we will make some adjustments. So I would like to hear from you as you're going through this. Do you like the once a week Friday due dates? Would you rather have daily things that were due? Now, also with the due dates, even though the due date is on Friday, due dates in my classes are flexible. That means I want you to stay with the due dates. I think there's good reasons to do that, but they're also pretty flexible, meaning I don't ever take off points for anything that is submitted after the due dates. Why not? Why do I give you extra time? Once again, I want you to do your best. I would much rather that you took your time and submitted something a couple of days late rather than rushing to get it done by midnight on the due date and doing a job that means you don't really remember, you didn't really learn. My recommendation with the weekly due dates is please don't wait until Friday to get started. Work throughout the week. If you're on a roll, keep going. If you feel like you're not concentrating, do another subject and come back to science the next day. Find a schedule that works well for you and keep me posted how you're doing. Thank you all for having your webcams on. We definitely are required to. It is an AIM Academy policy that you have to at least start class with your webcams on. If you can leave it on the whole class, I think that's best. We get to know each other better. I certainly get to know you better if I can see you. And the time is probably going to come where a lot of you are going to want a recommendation to get into college, to get a job, to get into a program that you want to do. If I know you, if I've been looking at your face and you've been talking, you've been answering questions, we have interacted with one another, it's going to be a lot easier for me to write a recommendation that is meaningful rather than just, yeah, she got good grades, or, you know, he turned his work in on time. Yeah, you understand? So keep that in mind. We have to talk about AI because, wow, is AI revolutionizing education. It is a major, major factor right now. So much so, we are embedding a couple of things into Canvas that use AI and that help to identify AI. So let me explain what I mean by that. Well, if you don't know what AI is, it's artificial intelligence, and you can think of something like ChatGPT or any of the other AI programs that there are out there as an expert who is sitting right beside you, an expert on every topic. Here's the thing though, it's not an infallible expert. There are some times that I'll type something in ChatGPT and the answer it gives me is wrong. I'm like, well, it's a good thing that wasn't submitted as an assignment because that would be marked wrong. And I'll try to find some. I'll try to have a couple and give you examples of that as we go along. You can use ChatGPT for good. And like all technology, it also can be used for not good. I won't say bad, but not good. The way to use ChatGPT or any AI program for good is to have it help you to learn something better, to learn more deeply. Now, you have to be at least 13 in order to use any kind of these AI programs, at least ChatGPT. Most of them have an age. If you're under 13, you can't use it at all. think most of you guys are over the age of 13, but if you're not, keep that in mind. If you're between 13 and 18, you can use it, but with parents' permission. So I want you guys to learn how to use it correctly. The correct way is I want more information on this topic, and I can go to ChatGPT, and I'm using that as my example, but there's a lot of them. I can go to an AI program and I can say, I don't really understand. So here's an example. Let's say one of the questions in one of the tests is compare and contrast mitochondria and chloroplasts. So those are both organelles inside a cell. We'll start the year learning about them. Compare and contrast them. And you think to yourself, oh, I don't remember what mitochondria are. You can go to ChatGPT and say, what are mitochondria? And it'll tell you what they are. And then you can use that information to answer the question. That's a good way to use it. A bad way to use it would be to copy and paste what it says, or to type into ChatGPT, compare and contrast mitochondria and chloroplasts. So you don't really learn anything. When you're doing that, all you're really learning how to do is copy and paste. And I'm guessing you guys already know how to do that. So I want you to learn the content. You have to be here anyway. Somebody signed you up for this class. Maybe it was you. Hopefully it was you, but somebody signed you up. You have to be here anyway. Make your time count. Make use of the time that you're here, because something comes after this that might depend on the knowledge that you have. I like to think of it this way. If you have pain in your abdomen tonight and you're rushed to the hospital and your appendix has ruptured, do you want your surgery to be performed by a surgeon who got through school using AI to answer test questions? The next time you get on an airplane, do you want the pilot to be somebody who got through pilot school by using ChatGPT? No. Well, that person is going to be you someday. Someday you're going to be the one holding the scalpel or holding the steering wheel on the airplane, or whatever the job is that you're going to do. Make sure that you actually make your time count, that you learn the material. And always just ask yourself, who do I want to be? What kind of person am I? Am I the kind of person who cheats, or am I the kind of person who works hard? Now, we have a couple programs that we're going to use that use AI or identify AI. So let me tell you a little bit about what those are. One is called Class Connect. Class Connect? Yes, I think it's Class Connect. What this is an AI that will be in some of our lessons. I'm not going to use it right away. I want you to get used to the Canvas format before we add that. It actually is AI embedded right in there that lets you have a dialogue. So going back to our mitochondria and chloroplast example, let's suppose that's the question. Well, right there will be this Class Connect companion. I'm sorry, it's Class Companion. And it'll have the question in it and you'll answer it. What's the difference between a chloroplast? Compare and contrast chloroplast and mitochondria. You type your answer in. The Class Companion will now say to you, okay, you did a really good job with the chloroplast part, but you're a little bit off on the mitochondria part. You might consider talking about this. And then you type it again. And then it'll say, okay, good job, but maybe this is a little bit wrong on this. It's like a dialogue where you go back and forth with Class Companion until you finally get the answer that I'm looking for, that Class Companion thinks is correct. We will use that, but this is really most useful in an English class where you're writing an essay. So it'll be helpful when you're doing lab reports. I'll probably put it in the lab reports because it'll help you. It'll be like I said, the expert who sits there beside you. That is an acceptable use of AI, actually a beneficial use of AI. The other program that we have in Canvas right now is called Plagiarism Check, plagiarismcheck.org. So when there are written assignments, let me give an example. If you've got a test, a chapter test that at the end has maybe 5 questions on it, you type up your answers, you submit it, you're going to get a report back from plagiarismcheck.org telling you if any of your paper is plagiarized. If it is, then you know, okay, what I did there, that was not okay. I need to go back and rewrite that in order to get it correct. And then you'll rewrite it and you'll submit it, and it'll be that second submission that I grade. Now I'll get all of them, I'll get both of them, but I'll only grade the second one. So on those kind of assignments, you'll have 2 attempts. The first attempt will be checked by Plagiarism Check, the second one will not. Again, I want this to be a learning tool. and not a stick. I'm not looking to catch you guys. I'm not looking to punish you. I'm looking to help you understand what is appropriate and honest use of these resources and what is not. Because plagiarism, whether it's from Wikipedia or the textbook or my lesson or AI or anything in between, plagiarism will get you thrown out of college. It will get you fired from a job, for sure. It'll get you fired from a job. I want you to learn right now at this age how to use AI appropriately and not get into trouble with it. If at any point you have any question about any of this, let me know. Now, here's what I can almost guarantee is going to happen. It's going to happen that the plagiarism check is going to say, oh, 25% of your paper is plagiarized. Well, maybe that's just one question, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was something that you actually wrote, but it's so close to something that's already online that the plagiarism checker catches it. Again, I'm here to help you. You just write to me and you say, okay, it said that I plagiarized, but I didn't. I'm going to believe you. I'm going to start out assuming integrity in all of you, assuming that your word means something. And we'll talk about things, we'll learn how to do it. It may be that we just need to change plagiarism check a little bit. Maybe it's a little bit too specific. There are some things, if I say to you, list the organelles in a cell, well, how many ways are there to list organelles in a cell? Somewhere, whatever way you write it, somewhere on the internet, somebody's going to have written it exactly the same way. Plagiarism check will find that and it'll say, oh, this is plagiarized, even though it wasn't. So I'm open. I'm very fluid with this. I definitely want to flow with this program and use it as a help and not a hindrance. All right. I keep track of attendance and I keep track of participation in class, and that will be part of your grade. So what that means is that I will bump your grade up. I will not take off points if you don't attend, and I won't take off points if you don't participate. I will, though, bump your grade up a little bit at the end in order to give you a little bit more if you come to classes and if you participate in the classes. More importantly, we're going to have way more fun with this class if we have a dialogue, if we interact with one another, if we can talk things through, if we can laugh together, if we can learn together. It'll just be a lot more fun than if you just sit and listen to me like I am right now, droning on, and you're just trying to stay awake because you're just tired listening to the same voice over and over again. So I'm going to try to have a lot of case studies, a lot of things that we have to solve, some puzzles that we have to try to figure things out. And hopefully we can get a lot of dialogue going. And I think that will make it a lot more fun for you. As Lillian and Ileana pointed out, we do Kahoot from time to time. I have one that we'll hopefully do at the very end. We also will sometimes use what's called Jet Punk Trivia. It's just a trivia game where there'll be a trivia quiz on the page and you guys will either shout out or type in the answers and I'll type them in. And we'll see if as a group we can work together to be able to move on, to be able to solve those puzzles. All right. Anybody have any questions about the business part of our classes and how this is going to run? Oh, one more important thing. I forgot to put a slide in about this. All quizzes and tests in my classes are open book and open note. All of them. You can and should always go back to the book to find any answers that you aren't sure of. So why do you think I might do that? Anybody have any guesses why I have open book tests? Rudra.
Because it's realistic to be looking back at something when you don't have a question like the real world.
Yeah, it is. There is no real world scenario outside of school where you are expected to solve a problem using only the knowledge in your head. No matter what job you get, once you're outside of school, you'll have access to resources. And I want you to have access to resources here. I want you to use them. Lillian.
This is just me speculating, but if we have no scenario out of school where we can't use notes, then why are we sometimes not allowed to use notes in school?
Well, the truth is there are some things that you just have to memorize. You guys are going to learn the difference between a prokaryotic cell and a eukaryotic cell. It's important. We're going to use those words all semester long, really all year long. So you need to get those in. You're going to need to know what photosynthesis means, what cellular respiration means. Learning those things will help you rather than having to look them up every single time. So some teachers will require memorization and will not want you to go back to your book in order to be able to find the answers. Now, it's said that a person has to encounter a new concept, a new topic, somewhere between 5 and 7 times before it becomes part of their memory. So let's count this through. So you first read it in the book. That's 1. Then you go to the quiz and the quiz talks about it, and that's 2. But you don't know if you understand this completely. So you go back to the book to find the answer to the quiz. That's 3. Now you go back to the quiz and you write it down. That's 4. Okay, maybe talk about it at dinner, and that's 5. Now you've moved that into your permanent memory, and that's important. Eleni, it also helps our skills with finding things in a textbook. Yes. So in line with, you know, you guys in your phone, most of you probably have a phone, or at least you have a computer because you're on it now. Every fact in the universe is on that computer, is on your phone. You don't have to have the facts anymore, but you need to know how to find them. You need to understand what it is that you do to find things, not only in a textbook, but also online. So hopefully this open book, open note will get you to be able to learn how to learn how to gather information. I will say, though, that does not mean that my tests and quizzes are easy. I don't give very many rote. I probably won't do something like list the organelles in a cell. That's just too easy. I'm going to say something like what's the difference between this organelle and that organelle? Or choose 2 organelles and tell me what function they would have in a city or in a government, or something that makes you apply information from a couple of different areas. And just like in the live classes, I use case studies and little short scenarios in order to ask questions in especially the tests, the exams that you will be taking. So you'll have to understand and apply different bits of information. So it's not going to be real simple to get an A, but it's possible. It's very possible to get an A. All right, let's move on. So science as a whole, including biological science, can be divided into 2 main branches. The branches are pure science and applied science. What's the difference? What do you think? Looking at the words pure and applied, what do you think the difference might be? Shmuel?
Pure science is like the data, and applied science is like how you apply it to life.
Yeah, that's a very good definition. Pure science is the discovery of knowledge. Let me put this up here. So it is the branch of science that focuses on just learning about something. You know, looking at the stars. We're just gathering information. When we look at telescopes, we're not doing anything with that. Learning about a new kind of bacteria, that's knowledge. Think of pure science as knowledge for the sake of knowledge. Yeah, good, Ileana. Pure is theoretical and applied is the process. Applied puts that knowledge to use. It is focused on knowledge use as opposed to knowledge discovery. If we look at it this way, we put them together. A pure scientist would say, why is this important? Where an applied scientist would say, how can I use this? So the discovery of electricity that would be pure science. What is electricity? How does it work? How do the electrons move? Learning then, bringing that electricity into the home to light a light bulb or power a computer, that's applied. That's applied science. And is biology pure science or applied science or a mixture? What do you think? Rudra says both. Yes, it's both. It's going to be a mixture. We certainly learn a lot about life. There is a lot that we know about things that we haven't made use of, but boy, are we trying to make use of the things that we learn. We're always looking at the animal kingdom and how they do what they do and trying to improve life for humans based on that. So yes, biology is a mixture of the 2. Let me see here. I'm going to move on to another one. Okay, so science has what's called a code of ethics. What does ethics mean? When I use the word ethics, what does that mean? Rudra?
It's like rules and moral rules I think.
Yep, good. You can kind of think of ethics as being right and wrong. You know, should we or shouldn't we? Just because we can do something doesn't necessarily mean we should. We will talk a lot about the ethical implications of a lot of the things that we learn about as we move through this. So take a look at this code of ethics that scientists try to follow. We try to work in a skilled and careful manner, communicate possible conflicts of interest, and take action to avoid dishonesty, be courteous, recognize others' discovery and contributions, confirm that all research is objective, well-grounded, and lawful, reduce negative impacts on living organisms and the environment, and communicate openly about scientific issues that impact society. So what do you think might be hard to stick to? If you look at that, what do you think might be difficult as a scientist? Jamel?
To communicate possible conflicts of interest.
Yeah. In fact, I think that's probably the hardest, because as humans, we have a bias. As much as we try not to bring our bias into something, we have a bias. There's, the old which is better, Coke or Pepsi kind of rule. Well, if you give somebody a Coke with this face and you give them a Pepsi with this face, that's clearly a conflict of interest that I'm passing on to my test subjects. Well, in your book, there is, on page 23, there's a section that's called Issues in Biology, when scientists have a conflict of interest. Now, scientists are expected to try really hard not to. We're expected to be honest about our investigations, and doctors especially are expected to place the welfare of their patients first. Researchers are expected to place the welfare of their test subjects first over their own, but there can be conflicts of interest that sometimes can threaten the credibility of the work that a researcher does. Now, a conflict of interest, tell me something that might be a conflict of interest, or even just define that. What does that mean? Shmuel?
When a doctor, like for example, gets money to go through medical school, and then he's doing research years later by the same drug company that gave him the money, then
Yeah.
he would naturally want to prove their drug is the best.
Right. Rudra?
It's like arguments between like which decisions they should go with.
Good. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? So money is often a big conflict of interest, but there's more. There's more than just financial gain. There's fame. Maybe if you are, you prove something cures cancer, now you're famous. Well, what if it didn't really cure cancer? What if there's a conflict of interest to get famous over that? Future work. If you continue, if you time and time again prove something isn't effective, is that company going to hire you? They're going to give you grant money to continue the work? Maybe not. There's a lot of possible conflicts of interest, but we want to avoid them wherever we can. So in the book, there's this scenario. Scientists are receiving money to test a potential anti-cancer medication. So if those research experiments show that that drug is not very effective, the researchers might be tempted to cover up the results. Are you guys with me? You understand what I'm saying? You're given some money to try to prove that this new drug cures cancer, but your experiments show that it doesn't cure cancer. You might be tempted to cover up your results, to conceal them. You don't want to lose your funding. So there are a couple different ways that we can look at this conflict of interest idea. Some scientists argue that since the public has to be able to trust the work of science, where are we if the public doesn't trust, right? We have to have some rules in order to preserve the integrity of the science that's being done. So some people say we have to have regulation, either government regulation over scientific experiments or regulation within the scientific community, and publications, meaning journals and newspapers and magazines, have to have very strict rules so that they avoid conflict of interest. So they think that every time there's anything published, there has to be an announcement of a potential conflict of interest. You have to say, I'm being paid by this drug company in order to put this research out. In some cases, they think that scientists should not be able to do work if they're going to gain financially or if they're going to get famous for it. So they should just have a standard payment. There shouldn't be extra money involved if they prove that it's effective, that this drug is effective. Now, others take the other side. Other scientists think that conflict of interest aren't necessary because most researchers, the majority of researchers, are honest and objective about their work. It's unfair to assume that they're going to have a conflict of interest that they're going to go with. And a regulation just assumes that everybody's going to try to cheat, that everybody's going to try to cover up their results. So we don't really need this. They think that the nature of financial support for research, it means that you have to get funding from elsewhere. You have to have the opportunity to have future work. You have to have the opportunity to be paid for the things that you find. And if we didn't have that, then a lot of new drugs and techniques would never be developed. So they think that scientists should be able to investigate anything that they want, whether they get personal financial gain for it or not. So what do you guys think? Which side would you argue for? How do you think that the views about a conflict of interest might be different from, different groups of people? You think there should be regulations on research, Shmuel?
Well, my father is a doctor, and I know that when he's doing a presentation, he puts in a slide where he shows all his possible conflicts of interest. But I could see he's like a clinician, but I could see how a researcher would not want to do that.
Yeah.
Or
So he's regulating himself.
right.
Yeah. Should a regulation be forced upon him from the outside? If somebody doesn't want to regulate themselves? Interesting thought.
Well, I
Umar.
think it should.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Umar.
I think there should be regulations because, like you said, it's human nature to be biased, right? And if you don't put some, at least maybe not something so extreme as no extra payment, but minimal extra payment just in case, because like you said, human bias is just it's a natural thing, and I think we need to do our best to try to counter that.
Good. Ayub.
I think there should be as well. I think the average person, like Umar said, the average person can't contain themselves. There's a level you can squish it down hard, but there's going to be some level of bias. It's just
We all want to be
we
successful,
can't
don't we?
control. Exactly.
Yeah.
Can't
We all
control
want
it.
what we're doing to work. Exactly. But here, Leo says some scientists are more responsible than others. So I think there should be some limits, but not so much that research can't be conducted. Yeah, it's a fine line there, isn't it? There's a very fine line. So you guys, do any of you know anyone who does scientific research for a living? Ayub?
It's my dad.
Yeah. So my sister does. And I can tell you from my sister's research, she is a microbiologist at the University of Iowa, and they are constantly looking for funding. They're constantly trying to find enough money to continue doing their research. And if their research isn't working, they're not going to get money. So you can see right there, that's a possible conflict of interest. I need more money. I better make it look like my research works. Now, I can say my sister works with integrity, but we'd like to think everyone does, but like Abe says, some of it's human nature. All right, regulation is really important because human error. Okay, so you sent that just to me. When you see the one that says direct message, that means the whole group didn't get it. So when I get a direct message, I don't tell who said it, but you guys won't see this. So make sure that you click the little blue box down at the bottom and set it to everyone in meeting so that it goes to everybody. Regulation is really important because human error is very prevalent and humans subconsciously will work to help themselves. That's interesting too, isn't it? Maybe it's not even intentional, but there's a subconscious bias that you might have. Regulation can help direct research to important things, make sure they are done well, but they should conduct it safely and not dangerously. Yeah, very good points. Very good points. So think about the people who are doing the research. Think about all this from their point of view. The researcher in the lab or in the field. Now think about the people paying for the research. Now think about the people who want to get some information about that research. Maybe the people who want to use the medication or the people who want access to that information. Can you see how all three of those groups are going to look at this slightly differently? Yeah. Conflict of interest. That's an interesting concept. All right. It's just a little sample there, guys, of some of the debates that I want to get into, the things that we're going to talk about here. All right. I want to jump into covering the scientific method. Is there anybody here who's never heard of the scientific method? Hopefully you've all at least encountered it. You've seen the steps of the scientific method. They're all, you can look at 10 different resources and they'll have 10 different numbers of steps to them. But in general, there are 5 steps or 6 steps in the scientific method. And here they are. We're going to make an observation. We're going to see something. We're going to observe something. We're going to ask a question, form a hypothesis, make a prediction based on that hypothesis, test the prediction with an experiment, analyze our results or our data and draw conclusions, and then communicate results. Now, there might be some other steps in here. Maybe between question and hypothesis, we would do some research. We would find out if somebody else has already done this study and gone into, go into their research and find out what they already know. Between experiment and conclusion, we have to evaluate our data. So we'll see that right in there. So I want to look at each of these individually. The scientific method is a way of thinking about science. Okay, hold on a second here. The textbook said another way to test a hypothesis is by finding more data. How would that work? By doing more research. Yeah, you'd get more data by doing an experiment over and over again, or find research that other people have already done. That's where the step in the middle here between question and hypothesis would come in. Shmuel.
Do you have to have observation? Can you just ask a question without observation?
Well, generally the question came from somewhere. You noticed something, you thought something. Even a thought of something comes from, at some point, an observation behind you. So let's talk about what we mean by observation. Basically, observation uses your senses or a tool that would extend your senses, like a microscope or a telescope or a computer or all of the technology that we have right now. Change the experiment a little bit. Yep, you can get more data by just making a little bit of a change in the way you do an experiment. Now, understand that's changing another variable. So change another one. You've created really basically a new, a controlled experiment. So that's our observation. So I have an example here. About 3 years ago, the country of China barred online gamers from under the age of 18 from playing any online games on the weekdays, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And they limited their play to 1 hour on Friday, 1 hour on Saturday, 1 hour on Sunday. And that's all. Now, those authorities who made that rule observed something. What do you think they might have observed? Rudra.
Angry people at their doorstep.
Why angry people?
Most of the people that I know have played or enjoyed a video game before.
Oh, okay. You mean after they made the rule, people were angry. Okay. What I mean is, what did they see that led them to make that rule? What do you think they might have observed that led to that action? Ileana says negative impact of gaming. Let's be more specific. What kind of negative impact could there be? Too many hours of video games per person, loss of sight, too many kids focusing on games and not their studies, too much time spent on it, aggression, unhealthy screen time, lower attention spans. Good. Less family time. We don't know for sure what they saw that led them to make this decision, but these are all possibilities. So let's focus in on the, let me pick one of these here. Not spending time on their studies. So let's say that they noticed over time student grades were dropping. Okay, is that a good? I think that's valid. That's a good possibility. So let's focus on that one. Let's say they observed that student grades were dropping, were trending downward. Now, what's the next step after that observation? Lillian.
Figure out what caused it.
We would ask a question, a kind of a what caused it question. Yeah, why? Why is this happening? Arudra says there was research done a few years ago that video games don't have a negative impact on mental or physical health as long as the gamer doesn't feel like they need to play as a requirement. Cool, cool, interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of research about video games. A lot of people have a lot of questions about screen time in general, games in general, video games in specific, but focusing on this one, let's take a look at what kind of question they might have asked. Like Lillian says, they wanted to figure out what caused it. So the questions often come in the form of why or how or what if, those kind of questions. So a kind of a question that they might ask is something like, why, yeah, good, Leo, why are student grades decreasing? That's a good question. So now after question comes hypothesis. Now, hypothesis is a tricky kind of a word. What do you think of when you hear the word hypothesis? Rudra.
Like a theory that could happen if they do something.
Good, good. Educated guess, Ileana says. Yeah, that's usually what we hear. Umar.
Prediction.
A prediction, yeah, prediction, idea or theory, a theory that could be right or wrong. So a really good hypothesis has a couple of parts to it. It has a statement and then it has a prediction. That's the best hypothesis. It has those two parts to it. It's not just an educated guess. It is an educated statement followed by an educated prediction. All right, let me go into detail what I mean by that. So the statement part, the part at the very beginning, is going to guide some research. The prediction is going to guess at the outcome. Now, we can use our hypothesis best if we write it in if-then format. If something is done, then something will happen. I know there's a lot of text on this page. I got to change this page. There's too much to read. So a really useful hypothesis is written as a conditional statement. If something that is done, then something will happen. Really, we need to have both of those whenever possible. It's not always possible, but usually it is. So it's like an essay introductory where you give the background information, then narrow it down to a thesis. Yeah, we got an English major in our midst here. Yeah, that's a very good way to look at it that way. We want to say what we're going to do in our experiment and then what we expect to happen as a result of the experiment. That's basically what we're talking about when we have a hypothesis. And a hypothesis will have that if-then, and the if-then can also be thought of as an independent variable and a dependent variable. So I know those terms can be confusing. So I want to try to clear it up a little bit. Remember, a variable is a part of an experiment. And there's three basic parts of an experiment or things that we need to address in an experiment. They are an independent variable, that's what you change. A dependent variable is what you observe or measure. And then a controlled variable is something you don't change, something that you keep the same. So look at these plants right here. What we're trying to do is see whether the amount of water given to a plant affects plant growth. The thing we're changing is the amount of water. We're not changing the size of the pot. We're not changing the kind of plant. We're not changing the temperature of the water. We're not changing the light, the sunlight that it gets. We're just changing the amount of water. That's one variable. The variable that is changed, we call it the independent variable, is the thing we change. Then we're going to measure either the size of the plant, the number of leaves, whether it's living or dead. We're going to measure something to see whether or not our independent variable made a difference. So here they are. Here's all of them together. We have an independent variable is the thing you change. We want to, whenever we can, limit it to just one thing in an experiment. Because if we look at this plant experiment here, and all three of these are different size pots, and we have three different kinds of plants, and this one's in the sun, and this one's in the shade, and this one's in a dark room. We've changed too many variables. We don't know what's going to make the difference now. We want to change one variable wherever we can. That thing we change is the independent variable. Then the thing that we measure, the growth of the plant in this case, is going to be what we call the dependent variable. And the control is everything else that we're keeping the same. So I like this guy. I think he does a good job helping you to remember. Eleni remembers him, right? So we will see him again. This will come up a couple times because I think it's a really good way to help to remember all of the different variables.
Independent variables are the ones you change. Independent variables are the ones you change. Dependent ones are ones you measure. Controls will stay the same, whatever. Independent variables are the ones you change.
All right, you all know what the word control means. When you control something, you keep it in, you keep it the same. You don't let it get out of its boundaries. You control it. So the controlled variables are the ones that you keep the same. So since you know what control means, all you really have to remember is the first line of that song. Independent variable is the one you change. And then you know the dependent is what you measure as a result of the change the independent variable made. All right. Now, keeping that in mind, if, then, independent, dependent, let's make a hypothesis for this situation. Remember, the observation that grades went down, that's what we're using as to why the Chinese government made this ruling. Let's write a hypothesis in if-then format for this scenario. If something is done, then something will happen. Independent is what you change. Dependent is what you look for, what you measure. What are we changing? What are they changing? If we cut screen time of minors, then their grades will increase. Excellent. That's an excellent hypothesis. We have the if there. We know what we're going to do. We have the then. We know what we're going to look for. We have the independent variable. That's the thing we change. We have the dependent variable, and we want to try to control everything else in a controlled experiment. If gaming time is lessened, then a student's studies will improve. Good. Those are good hypotheses. So after the hypothesis, we have the experiment. This is where the real value of having our hypothesis in if-then format comes out. If we write it in if-then format, we know what our experiment's going to be. It's our independent variable. If we limit video game time, that's what we're going to do. That's the experimental part of this. All right, we're running out of time. Let me see what I can jump ahead to. All right, let's take a look at this one here. Now, most experiments are best if we have a controlled experiment, if we control only one variable. Like we talked about before, if in this plant we changed a lot of things, we wouldn't know whether or not the temperature of the water made a difference or not. So in this experiment, what's the variable that's being changed? Temperature of the water. That's what we're going to change. And what is not changed when you're doing a controlled experiment, the answer to name some variables that are not changed, everything else. Everything else is going to be kept the same. We're going to keep the temperature of the room, the temperature of the kind of soil, the kind of plant, the size of the pot, the amount of sunlight, the amount of people that are bothering it. You know, whether we play music, we want to do the same to all of them. So we want to keep all of those other variables the same. Now, those variables, the things that we keep the same, they're not really of interest in a study. You don't have to list those in a lab report. Here's all the things I didn't change. You just have to make sure that they don't influence the outcome of the experiment. They're important, but they're not of interest, if that makes sense. You need to control them, but you don't have to talk about them when you're doing your write-up about it. All right, let's take a look at this one here. So this is data. The next thing that comes along after you do your experiment is you gather your data. So let's say we did this experiment here. We looked at how plants grow in soil that has different pH values. pH is acid or base. So if we have different pH values, we have from 6.0 to 7.2. And then we look at plant groups 1 through 7, and we measure the growth based on the pH of the soil of these different plants. We put it in this data table because it's a lot easier to understand a data table than a paragraph. I could have a paragraph that said plant group 1 was grown in a pH of soil of 6.0 and grew to an average of 25.4 centimeters. Plant group 2, I could have that all in one big paragraph, and it would make it take a long time for you to evaluate that. But boy, when I put it in a table like that, that's a lot easier now. So give me a, yeah, you would fall asleep before the end. You absolutely would. It would be tough. So give me a conclusion that you can come to when you evaluate this data. Shmuel.
The pH 6.6 and 6.8 are the best for the plants.
Yes. Yep. That is a good conclusion to come to. We also could conclude the other way. We could say pH from 6.0 to 6.4 and above 6.8 are not good for plant growth. Both of those would be reasonable conclusions to draw based on the data that we gathered from this experiment. And when we're talking about data, there are two different kinds of data. There's qualitative data and quantitative data. Think about what those words mean, quality and quantity. We could test pH 6.7. Yeah, we could. You could extend this experiment. So a lot of times when you're doing a lab report, we'll talk about this more when we talk about how to write a lab report in a future lesson. When you're looking at your data, sometimes your data will suggest, that's the word I'm looking for, will suggest a way to extend the experiment. And I like to see that in your conclusion, that you, or your discussion, the discussion part of it would be a way to extend this experiment would be to test different pHs. Yep. All right. So back to the quantitative and qualitative data. Quantitative data uses a number. It's a quantity. Qualitative data is a quality. So let me look at something in the background of, let's use Lillian's curtain in the background of her picture right there. Sorry, Lillian, we're all gonna look at you now. So some quantitative data about Lillian's curtain would use numbers. How long is it? How wide is it? It would be things that we could measure. How many of those little pinches across the top are there? Those would be things that would give us a number. So that would be quantitative data. Qualitative data would be the quality of it. What color is it? Is it shiny? Is it rough or smooth? Is it made of a open weave or a closed weave? All the different qualities of it. Why did it bold? Oh, I don't know. Interesting. Think I've ever seen a chat go bold before. All right. Okay, so finishing up this experiment in the minute we have left here, there were some challenges. There will be some challenges to collecting this data. For one thing, compliance is often an issue when you put restrictions on people. Getting them to do what you tell them to do. One of the very first things a lot of these kids in China are probably trying to do is find a way around it. How can I, circumvent the rules? So compliance is an issue. Another thing that's going to be an issue is time. Would a month be long enough to see whether it made a difference? What about a year? What about 5 years? Is this going to take a generation to be able to see the difference? Yeah. So another thing to consider here is that at the time that they made this ruling, they were not just limiting video game time. They were also trying to limit what they called celebrity culture, where students have celebrity heroes. So they're downplaying the idea of celebrity heroes. They also banned online education with foreign teachers. So they used to have online programs where teachers in America or UK or somewhere else could teach children under the age of 18. They banned that. Okay. Now, is this a controlled experiment? Why not? Lillian?
They changed more than one variable.
Yeah, they changed more than one variable. So they're not going to know. 10 years from now, if they see test scores went up, they're not going to know what caused it. If they see test scores go down or stay the same, they're not going to know. You don't know for sure. Sometimes we don't care. You know, if I have a, if I wake up tomorrow morning and I have a very bad cold, I'm going to throw everything I have at it. I'm going to drink my bone broth. I'm going to take vitamin C. I'm going to, rinse my nose out with saline. I'm going to do it all because I don't really care which one is going to help. I just want to get better. Right. So sometimes we don't necessarily need to have a controlled experiment. But when we do, we know what it was that made the change. Now, if a lot of this is confusing, don't worry about it. We are going to talk about this a lot. We're going to talk about, that the rule has been flexed a little bit. Yep. Yep. Well, it's interesting. It's interesting. We'll see. We'll see what's going to happen with that. Shmuel.
But China wasn't trying to make a scientific experiment. They were it was political. So
Right.
that could also be part of their observation.
Yep, exactly. That's exactly right. I just thought it would be an interesting case study, given that most of you guys probably enjoy video games. So yeah. All right. Anybody have any questions? Thank you for the participation today. This was great. I love it when we have a discussion. Remember, I'm here to help. I want you guys to learn. I want you to love this class. So anything I can do, let me know. Have a great week and I will see you next Wednesday. Oh,
Thank
wait,
you.
one more thing. We do have 2 sections to this class. We have a section that meets on Monday at 4 Eastern and then this time. I think it's best if you stay in this section for the most part, but if you ever know you can't come on Wednesday, you're welcome to come to the Monday class. There will sometimes be Monday students who come to this one as well. So definitely, keep that in mind. Flexibility is the name of the game. All right. Have a great week, everybody. I'll
Thank
see you
you.
next time. Bye.